Welcome, everybody. My name is Jamie DeMarco. For a short time longer, I am the Maryland Director at the Chesapeake Climate Action Network. Please, I first want to give a shout out to our incoming Maryland Director. We're joined tonight by some terrific lawmakers, including Senator Washington, Delegate Waffle, Delegate Waffle, and Delegate Eagleson, Delegate Henry. And we are all here tonight to talk about the Responding to Emergency Needs from Extreme Weather Act, or the RENEW Act. How about that acronym? We worked a while on that, but it's good. This is a magical bill. It's a bill that is going to invest hundreds of millions of dollars annually in all of the solutions that everyone in this room has been working for so many years. Just to name a few, it's going to invest in the Comprehensive Flood Mitigation Program, the State Disaster Relief Fund, the Office of Minority Health and Health Disparities, Living Shorelines, Resiliency Hub, Whole Home Retrofits Program, helping low and moderate incomes transition off of fossil fuels, Transit Innovation Grant Program, electric school buses, and transit-oriented development grants. So if you support those policies, let's have another round of applause. A bill that invested in any one of those things would be a great bill to support. A bill that funds all of them is an amazing bill and a landmark achievement that we are going to pass in the legislative session of 2025. I don't want to go on too long. I want to pass it to our incredible speakers who are here tonight. And after the speaking portion is over, we'll be hearing from the audience. You get to raise your hand and share additional things that you think that this money from the RENEW Act should be invested in. Because the best thing about the RENEW Act is that it doesn't make us, Maryland taxpayers, pay. It makes the polluters pay. Let's have a round of applause for that. First, I'm going to introduce Delegate Stephanie Smith, but she unfortunately has to run to a family reunion in Virginia Beach right after this. She stayed for this event, right? Yeah, the beach tonight. That's how much she cares. But she is a terrific lawmaker. She is one of our true champions on climate issues. She is an expert on these policies, both inside and outside of the legislature, and I'm very excited to have her with us today. Delegate Stephanie Smith.
I just want to say while I was sitting here, what's so great about this bill and the fact that it puts the onus on the polluters to pay their fair share is that we already pay now.
That's right.
So is it not? Yeah. Okay, we already pay right now. So anytime we're paying for pediatric admissions to the emergency room because of pollution, and we're paying through Medicaid for that, people are essentially using us to subsidize their poor treatment of our neighbors. And so I think it's the onus should be put on those that are polluting to pay their fair share of really preventing that harm in the future, but also helping those that are suffering in the present. I represent Northeast East Baltimore City, and many of you may be familiar with McGillicuddy Park. Are you familiar with that community? We know that it's the hottest part of Baltimore City, and Baltimore City is one of the hottest parts of not only Maryland, but the United States. We rank number 8 in urban heat island effect. And so we have neighbors who can't find relief in their homes and sometimes right in their immediate vicinity outside on their stoops. And that's not fair, because if you have diabetes, if you have COPD, if you have any other health condition, extreme heat is only exacerbating those ill effects. And so it is the right time to address the effects of fossil fuel pollution, as well as finding ways, honestly, to get off of it. We gotta break our addiction, but we can't break the addiction and forget harm that's already being experienced and has already been experienced. So this bill looks to the future while also setting to repair the harm that pollution has put in our communities. And one other thing I want to mention is there are workforce development opportunities to investing in the communities that have faced the most harm. So in a community like McGillicuddy Park or CARE or some of my neighbors, I live right there in East Baltimore. If we can get more cool roofs installed, if we can get more roofs repaired so that we can install solar, all of these opportunities not only will bring relief to our neighbors, it will also perhaps give a workforce opportunity to make our communities safer from the ill effects of climate change. The last thing I want to leave with you is, some of you may know, my full-time job is the Assistant Director for the Department of Planning. So I oversee the Office of Sustainability here in Baltimore City. I want to thank everyone in this room that contributed in any way to the update to the city's climate action plan, as well as our disaster preparedness plan, both of which have received national recognition for their work. So I just want to say thank you for being interested, thank you for participating, and thank you for letting me speak to you today. Thank you.
Well, it's right. We need to solve climate change, but we also need to survive climate change. And this bill is about solving and surviving climate change. We are really lucky to have some terrific sponsors of this legislation. In the Senate, we have Senator Katie Frey-Hester. In the House, we have David Fraser Hidalgo, who unfortunately can't be here tonight. But the co-lead on the House is the incredible Delegate Adrian Puapo from Prince George's County.
Thanks so much, Jamie. I'm gonna miss you. Congrats to you, Brittany. You have some big shoes to fill, but we know you're gonna fill them. As Jamie just said, I'm Adrian Waddle. I get to represent gorgeous Prince George's County. But it's good to be back in Baltimore City. This is where I got my start politically, just a few miles down at the University of Baltimore. Let's talk about how critically important this is. For too long, we've allowed companies to put profits over the well-being of the taxpayers of the city. And what we know is that heading into next session, we have a few decisions to make. Talking about $1 billion in fiscal structural deficits, and even more. And people in our state are struggling. But what the Renew Act offers us is an opportunity for $9 billion in revenue. Think about it, $9 billion in revenue. As Jamie just said earlier, not just fixing a lot of our climate issues, some of the structural issues we have here in the state. I say this often, if you've heard me speak at a press conference, I learned something really at a very young age. You make a mess, you gotta clean it up.
That's right. Yeah.
These companies have made a mess. If we pass the Renew Act, we're gonna allow them to clean it up. Let me end by saying this. With all that's going on in our country, with all that's going on in our world, I think about this as a young person. It is my generation that is feeling the true effects of climate change at a level that has never been felt before. It's going to be our generation that this is. And so I hope when we head into session next, all of you guys that are here in Baltimore City, travel down to Annapolis and come to the Economic Matters Committee. Ignore what you've heard about economic matters. It's a fun place to come. And come and testify and tell your stories. We know that this summer alone, Baltimore is added things as it relates to climate. And again, this bill offers a solution. And Maryland won't be the first in the nation to do this. This happens often. We always say that, Maryland's the first to lead. Unfortunately, in this case, Vermont has passed this bill before we were able to do it. But that means that states across the nation actually understand how critically important it is to get this legislation. So it's great to be here in Baltimore City. It's great to be where, this political life started for me. Again, thank you, Brittany and Jamie. Congrats to you on this new journey that you're going to embark on. And again, it's great to be with my colleagues. Thank you, guys.
I want to give a shout out to Vice Chair Boyce, who has joined us. We invited her to speak, but she wants to participate, which is terrific. Next, we're going to hear from Senator Washington, who is a fighter for Baltimore City and for all of Maryland. She's constantly pushing the envelope of what way can we do better and bigger to protect more people and do more good for more people in Maryland. We are so honored to have her support on this bill. Give it up for Senator Washington.
And again, I just never heard you speak though, and I'm very, very impressed. Yes, I've heard good things. And so honored to be here with my colleagues and to so many of you. And we're in the 43rd legislative district. So your the whole delegation, I hear the 43rd district delegation is in support of the Renew Act. I am State Senator Mary Washington. And I was a co-sponsor of the Renew Act. Thank the delegates and also my colleague, Senator Clyde Hester, who was the lead sponsor and who will be in charge again this year. It is indeed, this legislation is one of the most robust and comprehensive climate bills in history. And it will ensure that our communities are prepared. And facing the realities of climate change, not just sort of wishful thinking. We're not just simply talking about mitigation. We are really now in a space where we have to be realistic about the harms that have happened and that, in fact, the harms that have happened will be exacerbated. And while the Renew Act did not pass last year, our coalition is expanding. The calls to pass the Renew Act are growing louder and louder every day. In fact, 73% of Marylanders are in favor of making polluters pay. All Marylanders are in favor of making polluters pay. And this is according to polls, and we know the polls. So time and time again, our most cherished and historic communities are asked to shoulder the burden. And we know about disparate impacts. We know about overburdened communities, the flooding streets, the homes, unbearable heat, air pollution from wildfires, industries, and more and more and more. And these disproportionately impact certain communities. Communities that are in the 43rd legislative district and across the state of Maryland. And in fact, in the upper part of my district in Baltimore County, historic East Towson, a neighborhood founded by formerly enslaved people in 1853, has dealt with rampant flooding for decades. And as more and more of their community has devoted to development, as well as the climate impacts. They even faced the removal of one of the last remaining green spaces that is directly above the headwaters of the Herring Run. Of the 300 families who built the homes in East Towson, just 6 direct descendants remain. Community members and direct descendants of the founders of East Historic Towson include people like Association President Nance Golder, who have fought for years to protect East Towson's character and its natural resources. Here in Baltimore City, along the York Road corridor, residents of the greater Govans communities have worked together and continue to struggle and fight with the disproportionate impacts. That community, in particular the Winston Govans community, along that corridor, have an environmental justice score in the 94th percentile, meaning it is more impacted by pollution than 94% of any of the communities in Maryland. Because of air pollution, our rates in this community for asthma are 14%. And according to the Centers for Disease Control, this is 2.4% higher than Baltimore City's already high 11.75%. So right here in our district. And so I'm grateful to have allies in the greater Govans community, like Lisa Polyak and Cindy Camp, who have been calling for legislative action against air pollution along our corridor. Cumulative impacts matter. They contribute to heart disease, stroke, shortened lifespans, economic instability. We've been talking about cumulative impact, but we have yet to actualize and operationalize what this actually means. If this doesn't mean cumulative impact, I don't know what does. Flooding, air quality. These are things that happen over and over and over again to the same communities. Imagine what $9 billion of a fund could do in communities like historic East Towson and Winston Govans. And across the state, we can invest in climate resiliency, energy storage facilities, among other things, and provide heat pumps. In historic East Towson, just imagine, the funds could be used towards a comprehensive watershed study to analyze the impact and to preserve this natural environmental resource. In Towson, in our own city, but while we have this ongoing climate change, the other piece of legislation that I put in this idea is that we have environmental justice districts. Imagine using some of that funding to support our environmental justice districts and allow them to develop their own programming to address climate change. So I just want, I know I went on a little bit, but I wanted to actually say that right here in this district, where we have lots of green, we have lots of people who recycle, lots of people who are aware, we too have some of the most highly impacted, negatively impacted, the people who have paid the price for our addiction to fossil fuel, for us allowing companies to produce and pollute without paying the price. The Renew Act will change that. Thank you.
We talked about the Renew Act. I want to say a few more words about exactly how it works. If you're curious, it would say any company that has emitted more than 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions between the years 2000 and 2020 would have to pay into a fund, and they would collectively pay $9 billion over 10 years. There's about 40 of these companies, all of them do business in Maryland. None of them operate in Maryland. So not a single person who lives in Maryland is paying this. They cannot pass the costs on. Multiple studies have found this because they have competition who will not be paying this one-time fee. And it's retroactive, and so it is not current product. It cannot be passed on. That $9 billion, 900 million a year for 10 years that we're going to get is what's going to fund everything that we have wanted to fund for too long, but have heard that there's just not enough money to fund it. So that is how we're getting the money. That's how we're making the polluters pay. And that's how we're going to revolutionize people's lives in Maryland. And next, we are going to hear from Delegate Eagleson, who is a leader in transportation and getting us the funding we need for public transportation in Maryland, and making sure that as any investments that we make in roads are matched by the investments we need to be making in public transportation and all the great work that he's doing. Thank you.
One of the things that I've learned in my short time in the legislature so far is what ultimately gets bills across the finish line is the organizing and advocacy and activism of folks like yourselves. It's being in a packed room like this tonight on a Thursday night. It's a little cooler tonight, but generally a hot Baltimore summer. You all coming out from all the other things you could be doing to be in this room is the energy that we're going to take to Annapolis with us that's going to get this bill over the finish line. So please give yourselves a round of applause. My name is Delegate Mark Nielsen, but my better title, which Stephanie Smith placed on me, is that of Chase's dad. I have a 1-year-old son at home. And for me, frankly, that's the biggest reason why I'm out here doing this work, specifically on the climate piece, because that's our future. Right. And when I look at this brilliant young lady in the front row, I'm reminded of just how important that is. And we're all out here doing this work to make sure that they have a healthy planet to grow up on and live out all of their wildest dreams in a way that I hope that they have to do. So. Motivated for me. I represent the 46th legislative district, which is South and Southeast Baltimore, which includes a number of neighborhoods south of the Henry Street Bridge, right next to the harbor. So that's Cherry Hill, Mount Winans, Curtis Bay, Lakeland, Westport, Brooklyn, neighborhoods that have suffered some of the most intense, deep harms of our prior climate policies today, and the policies that have allowed polluters like what we're trying to change to decimate those neighborhoods, take advantage of those neighborhoods to make sure that they are overburdened and underserved, which is exactly what we're trying to change. So I have the privilege of representing those neighborhoods, and it's another huge motivator for me to be a part of this work. As Jamie mentioned, my role in the House has a lot to do with our budget. I sit on the Appropriations Committee. I'm also the Vice Chair of the Transportation and Environment Subcommittee. And so that is the epicenter where we figure out how to pay for all the things that we want to do. And this magical bill, as Jamie mentioned, it's exactly how we're going to do it. It's by putting the onus on the polluters to contribute back to society so we can help fill the funding gaps that we have to keep our commitments to the people of Maryland, to the young people of Maryland, to the future of Maryland, to the climate of Maryland, to the entire country and the world, quite frankly. So that's why this bill is so important. That's why being out here tonight is so important. That's why keeping this energy of this packed room for the next few months, but particularly as we go into session, is so important, because it is absolutely critical to the future of our state that we get this passed. So I am so excited to be with you tonight. Thank you all for being here. Let's keep this energy up and let's get this bill passed and voted on.
We have saved the best for last, but before we hear from Delegate Embry, I want to say, after we've heard from Delegate Embry, do not leave. We're gonna let you know what you can do to help get this legislation passed. Delegate Eagleson said, things in Annapolis only happen with grassroots power. And we are also, even more importantly, going to take a group photo, and you do not want to miss the group photo. So please stick around for that. But now, we are going to hear from Delegate Embry, who has been a champion in the legislature for climate issues, including this year she sponsored the bill to reform the STRIDE program that would have, you know about STRIDE. It is over-investing in gas infrastructure at a time when we need to be investing in other solutions. And so I want to pass it off to the wonderful Delegate Embry.
Katie, thank you. You are one of my inspirations along with your amazing family, and it's great to see everyone here. And I'm so glad to be here with my senator, my co-delegate, Regina Boyce. So much has been said. I just want to touch on a couple very small things. One is, in addition to coalitions mattering, arguments matter. And the arguments on this bill are overwhelming. The arguments to the contrary fall apart. I know I'm preaching to the choir, but they do. The economic arguments fall apart. The legal arguments fall apart. The Attorney General said he is prepared to litigate and support this bill. And as Jamie pointed out, the economic arguments that can be passed on to consumers, that's an impossible argument. So I think we have facts on our side. We have support on our side. We have all of you on our side. We have a budget deficit. I think this is the year. I hope this is the year. I believe this is the year. Jamie mentioned the STRIDE Act. I feel that I also think will ultimately pass for all these reasons, that it makes financial sense, makes legal sense, and it has the right support behind it. So I'm just proud to serve with everyone here, including my office mate. We have a lot of fun. And I know a lot of the people in this room, and I know how smart and how effective you are. So I feel extremely positive about this year. And I also trust our Democratic caucus. I trust our General Assembly, and I trust the good ideas went out and the people and so I am, again, I think we should fight as hard as we can, but I do think there's a reason to be hopeful. So anyway, thank you for having me. And yeah, I guess we're gonna take questions.
And feedback on what we should be investing in. We are going to give you the opportunity to choose how you are going to get involved. We have little placards that you can sign up to take specific actions. They look like what Brittany is holding right now. Brittany's going to pass them out. So as you're sitting there and continuing to participate and listen closely, yeah. So please feel free to fill those out on the back. There's multiple options for what you can do. Try to dig deep, think of what you can do, and check all the boxes you can. And Zippy, would you like to make an announcement?
So there are lots and lots of ways to get involved, which is why we have those cards we pass out. But I think it's really important to emphasize that the reason that we are doing this is because we are making a lot of demands of some very powerful people. The oil and gas industry is putting a lot of resources into making sure that they don't have to pay a dime of their lives. And we have the opportunity to make demands, but you can't win unless you have power. So we can't wait until session starts, which is why we have a lot of ways to get involved. So personally, I know that I'm going to be door knocking through the fall, and we're going to be doing that as a Baltimore team. And we have the Future of Gas hearing next week to talk about cracked gas, STRIDE, other issues, July 25th at 10 a.m. So there are lots of ways to get involved, and the cards are going around. That's great. But like, can we just get a show of hands if you're ready to get involved in this fight? If you're ready to like, oh. So if you just raise your hand before you leave, please stop and see Mustafa at the check-in table. We're gonna get you shifted for something. Thank you.
Thank you, Zippy.
Everybody who raised their hand here does one canvassing shift. We could get probably at least halfway to our goal. We have a goal of 1,000 people to join this movement through the fall. So if everybody just did one, makes a significant impact.
If everyone just does one. Makes a big difference. So yeah, be sure as you're leaving, stop by and see either Mustafa or Zira to get signed up for a shift. Now we are going to Yes, feel free to sit. We've had the lawmakers up here for a long time. But we are now gonna go to audience and engagement. And so I wanna, this bill, as I said, is gonna bring in $900 million a year. I listed some of what that is going to in the bill as introduced last year. But we want to improve it for this year and make sure we're funding everything that needs to be funded. So if you have a thought or something, a solution, an adaptation matter, or a way to get off fossil fuels that you think really needs additional funding, now is the time to raise your hand and share it and be heard by the bill sponsors. Or if you have a question about the bill, feel free to share that. Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. Could you give us some specifics about the kinds of things that we can fund? So for example, will we be planting a lot more trees? Will we be giving homeowners the ability to mitigate storm runoff? I mean, there are a lot of things we could do, but we've been sort of short on some.
Thank you for that. And I listed at the front end, some of the things that it funds, which does include the comprehensive flood mitigation program, which specifically helps mitigate flooding in buildings. It also will fund with the low and moderate income households transition off of fossil fuels. There's a specific fund for that. One of the things I love about this bill is it's giving a lot of money to existing programs that work really well and amplifying those programs. There's a resiliency hub program. We saw in Texas this past week when the power goes out and heat index is over 100, it's really dangerous conditions. And so what's happening right now is counties and cities across the state are investing in resiliency hubs that have backup power that communities can go to. And there's a grant program for that. There's also electric school bus funding in this to help school districts go towards electric school buses. Transit-oriented development grant to help us invest in public transportation, help the buses come more often, break down less. There's a state disaster relief fund that we have created as a state. We haven't put any money in it yet, but we have a fund. This would put money in that fund for the first time. And those are just some of the things, some of the specifics of what it would. Do any of our legislators want to say anything?
Air.
What?
Air conditioning.
Yes. Air conditioning for schools. Yeah, there's lots of public buildings. Prisons need air conditioning. It is torture to have a prison without air conditioning. And there are prisons in Maryland that do not have air conditioning. Those are expensive upgrades and they've got to be invested in. Yes, in the back.
Hi, General Secretary, I'm glad to see there's money for electric school buses. I do think that also needs to go to solar and pumps in schools because the children are going to take on most the front of this. And you can go back.
Solar, I'm repeating for folks online. The comment was that we should also be investing in solar for schools and heat pumps for schools to keep kids safe. I saw other hands. Yes.
Megan, sure. I wanted you to tell me a little bit more about how you're gonna get the $900 million out of the company. Without their passing on the cost to the consumer. How does that work?
That is a great question. I said, I went pretty quickly through that. There are hundreds of companies engaged in the business of digging oil out of the ground, refining it, and distributing it. 40 of those companies will pay into this fund. Those 40 companies will still have to compete with the hundreds of other companies who are not paying into this fund. And so through market competition, it is ensured that the cost cannot be passed on to consumers. So if one company, so if you're selling oil to distributors and another company is also selling oil to distributors and you raise your prices, but your competition doesn't, the distributors are just going to buy from your competition. So market forces, and there's a great study by the Institute for Policy Integrity that looked at this in great detail and found that the way the distribution system works, it would be impossible for them to pass these costs on. And I see a follow-up.
Well, just the 40 companies, those are the ones that actually do business in Maryland.
The other hundreds do business in Maryland. There's a certain threshold. The bill says if you've emitted more than 1 billion tons of greenhouse gas emissions between the years 2000 and 2020, then this bill applies to you. So all the others have not emitted that much. Yes.
So you're paying a retroactive tax for the emissions you caused. And what about the emissions the companies cause going forward?
You're right, this is retroactive about past emissions. It is based on a Superfund model. We're all familiar with Superfunds, the EPA administers a company or group of companies contaminate a specific site. They are then required to pay into a fund to remediate that contamination. This is the same idea, except in this case, the site happens to be the global atmosphere. But you're right, this is not a tax, this is not a carbon tax, and so there's no taxing on current sales or future sales. Yes, Buzz.
Where's the governor on this?
That's a great question. The governor has not taken a position on the Renew Act. So please call the governor and ask him to support the Renew Act.
Not the Senate President and the Speaker.
The Senate President and the Speaker have also not taken positions. But we are confident, we feel confident 2025 is going to be the legislative year we get this through. But you're right, we got to get all those pieces. Yes.
Right now, the state is allowing, incinerators like the one we have in Baltimore, to benefit from renewable energy credits. I mean, that's really crazy, because they're polluting, and they're putting carbon dioxide into the air. And they should be subsidized for that. I realize that it's not part of the Renew Act, but what is seeking to do to make that, not happen anymore?
That is absolutely right. It is absurd that we are taking all of our dollars, all of our utility dollars, and using it to subsidize the trash incinerator that is literally burning trash for us all to breathe in. CCAN has two legislative priorities for this year. One is the Renew Act, and the other is a 100% clean energy bill. That is, as part of that bill, going to take trash incineration out of the RPS at some point. We may rechange the entire RPS, so it looks entirely different. There's a lot of conversations going on, but we know that that problem cannot go unaddressed. Thank you for the question. And I'm taking off, but I want to, if anyone, yes, I know.
The only thing I would say about that particular, tier two, that was the first vote I took against leadership when I voted against the amendment, along with 13 other people in the House against adding, tier two, that was in the first reading. It's been going on but it's been going on for a while, and there are those of us just every year trying to get that removed, but, I just know because I remember. Yeah, the environmental community, we didn't know, it was sort of just snuck along last minute sort of thing. We're just like, oh, what's this? Okay, this seems all right. And then there was a flaw of, no, this is bad. Heaven Zero is one of the 13 people who voted packages her, folks stand up to remove that from the bill. And so 13 was only before I like to see the time. Yes.
It is really hard for lawmakers to take a vote against leadership, and Senator Washington did that for this cause. So let's all just give a round of applause. Yes, and
Where can we access a copy or a synopsis of that bill?
if you go to the Chesapeake Climate Action Network, or go to ccanactionfund.org, and there you'll be able to find a website with more details. We have time for a few more questions and comments. Yes.
We weren't able to pass it last year, so what have we learned that will help us be able to pass it this year?
That's a great question. We have gained a lot of momentum for this legislation. At the start of last legislative session, I think most of the lawmakers didn't know about this bill. I think it's now thoroughly part of the conversation. We were also told at the start of last session that last year was, particularly from the Senate President's office, they said 2024 is not going to be the year for big revenue raising bills. So out of the gate, it was like, look, I have no problem with this bill, but we're not doing big revenue raisers, and this is a big revenue raiser. 2026 is an election year. Usually lawmakers don't like to do big revenue raisers in big election years. And so 2025 has got to be the year, and we have a structural deficit, projected multiple $billion deficit as a state. And so this 2025 has got to be the year that we, as a state, find a way to fund public education, find a way to fund mass transit and plug the budget hole in general. But the fourth thing we need to do is fund climate, because the governor's own climate pollution reduction plan said we need to be investing $1 billion a year, every year, between now and 2031 to meet the climate goals. And that's what this book helps. Two more, I think. Yes.
Yes. How do you determine that a company has emitted another carbon? How's that measured and happening?
It's based on sales of coal, oil, and gas. Part of the reason we do the year 2000 and 2020 is those are the years we have better data for, and more digital data, and it's easier to track. But for every therm of gas that you sell, there's a certain amount of CO2 that's emitted, and you just do the multiplication. And final question.
Yeah, two things. One, the governor has said that we're not raising taxes and we're cutting the budget. So that seems like a real problem in getting this passed. We met a lot of opposition last time, the same opponents. They're going to be there again. How do we overcome that?
We overcome the opposition by being bigger and stronger and growing our grassroots power. Only people power is going to overcome money power in politics.
And it's not a tax, right?
And it's not a tax. And that's also a great point.
And are other environmental organizations, is this a coalition of?
Yes. We're forming a new coalition, Climate Investments Coalition, that includes groups like the Sierra Club, League of Conservation Voters, Interfaith Power and Light, and others. All of us working together to make sure the state is investing in these climate solutions through options like the Reconnect. These were some great questions, some great feedback, and we're going to. What?
Vermont, New York.
Yes, as mentioned earlier, this passed in Vermont, this passed in New York. The governor decided whether to sign it. Passed out of committee in California. This is a trend that is catching on, and Maryland should ride that wave. Now we're going to do the most important thing tonight, which is take our group photo. In a minute, but not yet, I'm going to move this podium over here. We're going to take this banner down off of the stand and move it right up here. And then all of us are going to come in behind the banner for the group shot. Does that sound good to everyone?
Yeah.
3, 2, 1, break.
Yeah.
Okay, everybody come on. Harold. Okay. Got me behind the on this, just come in a little closer. Richard. Oh, I think there's maybe. Okay. Okay. So, when you get this second, more. Okay. 3, 2, 1. All right, if you're past Corinne, I can't see you. Just file in.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Maybe
Get in the picture. Hey,
Okay.
your mother
Okay.
instructed you to get in the picture.
1 second. 3, 2, 1, pass the renewal. Okay, Rachel, do you want to take a photo?
Yes.
Thank you, Rachel.
That's this.
Okay, Rachel. you take a photo. 3, 2, 1, pass the renewal. Okay, and this time we're gonna raise our fist in the air. 3, 2, 1, pass. Okay. Thank you, everyone. Please sign up to take action on the plan.